a confession. I have made a lot of mistakes in my designs which have not made it into my videos, but I have been doing some reflecting and I have learned a lot from these mistakes. So I've decided to swallow my pride and I'm going to share them with you today in the hopes that you might learn something from them too. So hello and welcome, I'm Ellen and I'm going to share with you today my 5 biggest interior design mistakes and how to avoid them. So without further ado, let's go. Okay, so mistake number 1 that I've made is not considering proportion. So essentially the size of something in relation to the size of another thing. The most obvious example of where I've done this is in my brother's bedroom makeover. I bought a ladder to sit behind some of the armchairs that he had in his room, and as soon as I put it in, I knew it was wrong. But I had bought it and I'd already put it together and I was like, I just have to roll with it. And I tried my best to kind of fix my mistake by putting a really tall vase at the top with some leaves in it. And it kind of gave the illusion that it's a little bit taller than it is, but it didn't quite hit the mark. What I should have done is paid attention to the golden proportions rule, which is to have something 1.6 times bigger than the other thing. I think it also works in the reverse, where people will say to put the smaller item approximately 2/3 smaller than the larger item. So what I should have done was consider the size of the armchair, which was 90 centimeters tall and 90 centimeters wide. Now, I don't know what that is in inches. I'll put a conversion on the screen because I can't do that kind of math in my head. If I've got something that is 90 centimeters high, if I multiply that by 1.6, I get approximately 145 centimeters. Again, I'll put a conversion below. So the ladder that I actually got was about 135 centimeters tall. So I'm 10 centimeters too short, which may not sound like much, but in the design world, makes a difference. So I was too short. But then the other problem is that I was too skinny. So it just looked dinky and pathetic behind the armchair. So when you have furniture already and you're looking to buy something new to add to your space, think of these proportions in terms of the size of your room, the size of your furniture, what else you have there, and think of height, think of width, think of length, everything, and making sure that everything is sort of within those golden proportions. Okay, so mistake number 2 is kind of similar to mistake number 1, is in that check your measurements, but it's actually in a different design principle. It's a mistake in terms of balance. Symmetry to us looks appealing. We see things that are symmetrical and we think they look good. So you can do this actually symmetrically or asymmetrically as long as the weight of the items seems approximately equal. So I actually saw a post on Facebook about this recently, which really demonstrated this quite well, where she had all the heavy items on a bookshelf all on one side, and it looked like the bookshelf was just ready to kind of topple over. And she was asking for advice on how to fix it. I played around with it a little bit on Canva, and I found that if I put the heavy items, a few on each side, that in general the shelf just looked more balanced and looked better. So that's an example of where balance can really improve your design and styling. But the mistake that I made for this point is actually in my mum's bedroom makeover. So again, I must have some kind of measurement blindness or something like that, where I didn't check the measurements before I bought something. I found this light for my mom's room, which I thought just fit perfectly in terms of style and color and the design of the light. But I didn't actually check the measurements, and when I opened it and pulled it out, I went, oh my god, it's as big as my head. So then I had a kind of mad scramble to find something that would balance out the size of this light on the other side of the room. And look, I found something that was almost there. I don't think it was perfect. I think it was still a little bit too small, but it was the best that I could find in the time frame that I had to work with. It was, again, a band-aid solution, but I did my best to try and balance out the weight and size of that light on the other side of the room so that it would look more like cohesive and balanced. So always pay attention to your measurements and always be thinking about how can I make sure that this item on this side of the room is balanced with that side of the room, and you know, everywhere in between. Okay, mistake number 3. Mistake number 3 is about colors, and specifically about undertones. This was another mistake in my mum's bedroom, which didn't make it onto the video. Previous one did, but this one didn't, because this one sent me into a full-blown meltdown, and when I was editing the video, it was still a little too painful for me to include. So what happened is that I made my mood board and I planned and picked everything out that I thought I wanted in the room, but partway through the project, I changed the wallpaper from what I originally planned to something else, and the original wallpaper was more of a yellowy tone, and then I changed it to something that had a bit more of a pinky tone. And everything in the room, the stain, the paint color, all of it had like warm pinky undertones, and they all tied in really, really nicely together. And I was feeling super good about it until I pulled out the bed cover. So the bed cover I actually bought at the beginning of the project, and in my head for some reason I just thought it was pure white, but on the website it was actually called ivory, and it actually had a yellow undertone. So when I pulled it out and put it across my mom's bed, it just clashed. It was so obvious that it was just not meant for that room, because the yellow against the pink just did not look good. So again, I had to scramble, find another solution. I actually took over this to my mum's room, because this is pure white, and used that for filming. And also my mum, who is an absolute angel, went out to the shops for me and found some cushions for me. I had a couple of pink cushions that I had just lying around my house that I weren't using, and I took those over as well and managed to pull it together with more pinky colors and pinky undertones. But yeah, it was just it was just really stressful. So when you're planning something, when you're looking to buy something new or whatever into a space that already has colors in it, don't forget your undertones. And I find the easiest way to figure out what your undertones are is to just hold the thing up against a plain white piece of paper. If it's giving off pink, if it's giving off yellow, whatever color it's giving off, that's your undertone. So pay attention to your undertones, make sure they all match, and everything will look a whole lot more cohesive and a whole lot better. Okay, now mistake number 4, which is another thing about color. And this was actually for my own bedroom makeover, this room that I'm in right now. And this came from my own inexperience about not understanding how to make a cohesive color palette. And I'm still kind of building on that, if I'm honest, because I don't actually have any formal training as a designer. A lot of things that I've done to date is just purely off my own intuition. So when I was planning this room, I really easily decided on the wallpaper, mural, the decor, even the curtains and everything. But when I came to doing the cushions, I just kind of put it in the too hard basket, and I was like, I'm just going to see how everything looks with what I've got so far, and then hopefully the cushion choice will become really obvious and apparent to me when I get to it. Well, I spent 3 weeks agonizing over these cushions. I was in Tab City. I had so many tabs open of different cushions, and I was putting them all over my mood board and trying to figure out which ones I liked, which ones went well together, and I couldn't crack it. And I'm going to put a screenshot in the screen of me talking to a friend where I sent them a picture of my mood board, and I was like, I'm going to find this funny one day, right? And he was just like, oh my god, Ellen, what are you doing? Pick a cushion. And I just couldn't pick. So in the end, I ordered too many, and I wasted a lot of money on cushions that I didn't actually end up using because I couldn't decide. I needed options. And in theory, I could have returned them, but I'm lazy, so I didn't do that. And I still just kind of have them in my house. Yeah, I just spent way more money on cushions than I needed to, simply because I couldn't figure out in my mind what kind of color palette I needed. And the main problem that I had was that I didn't know how to ground the color palette. And what I actually needed was these brown cushions. And these brown cushions just served as that kind of darker color to just ground everything else in here, because if you remove these, everything just starts to look white, green, and kind of beigey, and it just kind of falls a little flat and looks a bit meh. And so when you think of color palettes, they've always got a spectrum from dark to light, and they've usually got a couple of darker colors and a couple of lighter colors and maybe 1 or 2 also in the center. So once I put these on the bed, I realized that that's what I was missing. Most commonly said design rules for color is the 60-30-10 rule. And in theory, I've kind of done it a little bit in here. Basically, it's to say you want to split a dominant color with 60% of the room, 30% with a secondary color, and 10% with an accent color. So in this room, you could say that I've done predominantly white and then green as my secondary color. I've got a few shades of green, so it doesn't all have to be exactly the same shade of green. It can be different shades of green. But then my accent color is the brown. So before I put these in, I just didn't have enough of the accent color, and it was probably more like 5% of the brown rather than 10%. And once I added these in, it was just enough of that contrasting accent color to make everything look good. So when you're designing a room, think in terms of, doesn't have to be exact, just approximate proportions of 60-30-10, and everything will look a lot more balanced and it will not look like anything's missing or anything's falling flat. Okay, last mistake. I will admit I am a little bit embarrassed about this one because I really think that I should have known better. And that is again for this room that we're in right now. And that is about lighting temperature. Now, most design blogs will tell you, make sure to match all your globes so that they have the same Kelvin and so that they all look good and blah, blah, blah. But I didn't. I thought I did, but I didn't. So for my bedroom, I've got two main sources of light. I've got the pendant lights behind me and I've got a dresser in front of me with a lamp on it. And these lights behind me were a little bit of a DIY. So these are rechargeable globes, whereas the globe in front of me on my dresser is an IKEA globe. And both of them on the packaging said they were warm white, but these warm whites were not equal. One of them was 2700 Kelvin and the other one, these ones behind me, are 3000 Kelvin. So actually these ones look more white than the lamp on the dresser, and I actually prefer for a bedroom that warmer yellow light that is on the dresser. So I actually find at nighttime I'm not even using these, and I've searched everywhere to try and find rechargeable globes that are 2700 Kelvin, and apparently it just doesn't exist in Australia that I can find. I could find some from Germany that could ship, but you know, who wants to ship from Germany in this economy? I might have to just bribe my uncle with a nice morning tea to come and hard wire some lights for me. But alas, that is the fifth mistake. So decide what Kelvin you like for your room, whether it is warmer for a bedroom like 2700 Kelvin, or if it's sort of in a more main area, you might want something that's slightly more white like the 3000 behind me. I think personally my preference is to avoid anything more white or cooler than that, because I think it just starts to feel a little too clinical. But decide on what your preference is and just make sure all your globes are the same Kelvin. Don't look at warm white, because apparently 3000 and 2700 both classify as warm white. So check the Kelvin on all your globes and make sure they match, and everything will look more cohesive. So that is it, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. I just want to thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.